Hello and welcome to the first episode of this season of Captain's Compass on data roles. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the day-to-day life of a BI analyst and also share some tips on how to land a role in that position. If you enjoy this content, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button to stay up to date on when the next episode launches. Let's dive in.
Hi everyone, my name is Tighe. I am a senior business intelligence analyst at Apollo. And if you haven't heard, we are a sales engagement and intelligence platform, so check us out for sure. I've been in this space about 5 years, and hopefully I can answer all the questions that are posed today.
So you work at Apollo, so that means that y'all definitely do BI work on the moon, right? That's what that means. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I was just making sure.
We're the data analytics team is rather new here. When I joined, I was second analyst hire, so everything's being very built out at the moment.
Sure. So I've obviously stalked your background a little bit to kind of see where you got to your role, but can you kind of talk about kind of your data experience at this point? So kind of where you started out in the field and how you've ended up in this BI role that you're in now?
Yeah, definitely. I think the great thing about the data community and just being in this role is you kind of can come from anywhere. And I've really experienced that everyone here started somewhere different. And very similar to my experience, I actually started in marketing and I was writing ad copy. Was not going well, terrible at ad copy, stronger with numbers. So I started to go that route. And that's kind of how I got here. I learned SQL on the fly, on the job, and just absolutely fell in love with it and really have run with it since.
Yeah, so something I've noticed in my short data career is that I feel like a lot of data projects kind of lean into the marketing and kind of sales realm just because it's very easy to kind of like calculate that ROI in those fields because it's like, oh, we got more customers or, oh, our marketing budget worked, brought more ROI to us. So how was that experience? And I know you said that you might not have been great at writing ad copy, but how did that experience in marketing, how has that kind of translated for you into the data field? Has it been, I'm assuming pretty successful. It probably helped you out, right?
Yeah, I think so. The company that I worked for was a consultancy company. And I think just consultancy in general, you work a year in consultancy, 6 years of actual work, right? So I think that really prepared me to kind of jump into the data field as it's a steep learning curve and rather fast, but definitely helped me along the way. And I think that like the client management aspect of the data role is highly important and not really talked about. That prepared me a lot.
Yeah, it's something that has been brought up in almost every episode of this series so far with all my interviews is like, obviously like having those like hard skills of like SQL and working in like a Tableau or something like that, obviously really important. Like you got to have those to get the job done.
Oh yeah.
But what's more important that we don't talk about, like we just mentioned, is like understanding business context, like working with stakeholders, like understanding kind of like how to please those people, right? And so yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. So so kind of as a BI analyst, what does your day-to-day life look like at Apollo? Like what do you like kind of walk me through what happens on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, definitely. So we do sprints. So right now we're in a 2-week sprint. We just kicked off one. So it's kind of, grooming through the backlog. So we use Jira for project management. And you kind of just take your week as you want to plan. I have a great manager and he kind of like scopes out my week for me. And then from there I take it and however I see fit to prioritize tasks and projects is kind of what I do. A lot of the work that I do involves a lot of model and data transformation. So I'm mainly in DBT, kind of making sure that our data is flowing in properly and QA validating, but also building those golden data sets that our stakeholders are going to see in the final product.
Interesting. So whenever I think of BI analysts, I don't think of like SQL that much, and I don't think of like using DBT that much. So it's interesting that you said that. So I'm gonna bounce back to that in just a second. But how, like you mentioned that you kind of learned SQL like on the job, like you kind of learned it while you were working. Like how did you use any tools to do that, or was it just kind of crash course like going for it?
Luckily, there was a great mentor at the marketing consultancy company that I worked for. And I was the one kind of building all of our Google Sheets visualizations and linking them to our presentation. So I was doing a bunch of that bulk work and basically had built out templates for our clients. And then they were like, you need to come to the data side. So he kind of took me under his wing and he like showed me what SQL was, like how it's so much better than being in Google Sheets. Get out of Google Sheets if you're in Google Sheets or Excel. And yeah, so after that, we just like slowly started learning how to write SQL.
That's quite the hot take in the data community is to get out of the Google Sheets and Excel. So I'm going to dig into that for a second. I'm going to let you kind of dig your grave here a little bit. So,
Oh no.
so my first job in the data field was I was a BI analyst at a company, a lumber company, and no idea what I was doing. Completely lost. Wasn't great at it, which is thankfully why we have you to talk about this. Because if it was me talking about BI analysts, we talk for about 3 minutes and then be done. But a problem that I had in my organization was I was obviously trying to build things out in Power BI. Like I was doing all the stuff, building star schemas. Like I was out there doing my best. But the stakeholders had no interest in looking at a BI dashboard. They wanted their data in an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet. Have you had that experience in your career at all, where like you've kind of had the fight back from stakeholders to like want their data in a spreadsheet? And how do you handle that conversation in a way that you can get them over to I was going to say the better side, the light side, not the dark side. Not trying to make a Star Wars reference, it didn't work out. But how do you kind of get them over to like accept that as versus a spreadsheet?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And if stakeholders do push back, I think it's just having to educate them and almost reframe how they think about data, and the risk associated with giving them an Excel sheet or just something in Google Sheets. There's just way too much room for error for them to be able to start creating metrics that are not tied to any business knowledge, that are not approved by the business. And then we're going to have different things floating around. That's kind of the biggest argument I make, is like we need this kind of in one place so that there's not random metrics floating around. And then I also think that in this space, we have a lot of tools that are actually self-serve data now. So what we use Looker, and that kind of has the need for them. If they want that Excel sheet, you're like, here, go to Looker, you can explore here. And it's, instead of kind of having to format everything, Looker's going to do it for you. You just have to drag in your field.
Interesting. So, yeah, that makes sense. That was always the argument that I tried to make as well, was like, hey, like I'm going to create this master version of this Excel sheet, but then and a week later, there's going to be 30 versions of this Excel sheet that have doesn't look anything like what I made a week ago. I'm glad that those conversations have went better for you than they did for me. You probably framed them a bit better than I did. So, so going back to the DBT and the SQL part of the role. So again, whenever I think about a BI analyst, I think about obviously working in like a tool like Looker or Power BI or Tableau. How much of your job on a daily basis is like working in SQL and like DBT versus like actually being inside of the tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say majority of my job I'm actually in DBT and writing SQL. And then definitely a smaller portion is in Looker that I found. But I think that's one of the weird things within the data roles and namings, is that all of these namings are different, but we're doing similar things, or it's like a crossover of like an analytics engineer. Just there's a bunch of terms out there, and I think it's really specific to like what the company has advertised for that role.
Yeah, that's what I just interviewed an analytics engineer before you, and she was talking about using DBT, and I was like, wow, it sounds like you are doing basically the same thing. But I think that's kind of the point of this series, right? Is that you are a BI analyst, but that doesn't mean you can't write SQL, and it doesn't mean you can't use DBT. So I'm going to dig into DBT a little bit, because I feel like DBT has been I know it's been a hot topic in the community lately with price increases, but I think it's been a bit of a hot topic with a positive and negative throughout the past few years, because it's such a market leader. So some people think about DBT and they're like, it's just a place to write SQL, which isn't wrong. Like, that's not exactly untrue. But it's more than that as well. So can you kind of talk about kind of the value gain that DBT gives you, like as a business user? Like how does it make your life easier versus like just writing, raw SQL in like a Snowflake or something like that?
Oh my gosh, well, that organization for sure is top of mind there. I couldn't imagine trying to put data culture first and only having Snowflake. I think the main advantage of having a DBT repo is that it is your master for your entire team. So everyone kind of has visibility into the different models that you have and are able to kind of just look through and peruse on their own. And it also provides different, depending on like which business unit you're working for, it's very organized, so you can kind of see in um, of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, so obviously the visibility is a big key. So like downstream and upstream, right? So like if you're talking to your data engineers, they can see what's going on. If you talk to your like business users, they can also see what's going on. So how do y'all operate like DBT at your organization? Do you allow everyone in the DBT? Like, is it pretty secured off? Like, do y'all just host your docs somewhere? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it is. It's very secure. I would say that if you're not on kind of the data analytics team or a data platform team, you're not going to necessarily have access to like the raw SQL. We do have visibility into our documentation. We kind of have a something that we plug in that extracts our documents, so we're still able to see all the descriptions, column lineage, and that is what we give access to the company.
Mm. So your title, you mentioned that you were a senior BI analyst. So this is a topic that's been pretty heated throughout my interview so far, which I didn't get to give you a chance to send the questions to you, but I usually ask a question that's something about, is there any chance of getting promoted at your job? And generally that's what kind of pops up as like basically being like a BI analyst or a junior BI analyst and then transitioning into a senior BI analyst. Mm-hmm. So can you kind of talk about, because like whenever I think of the word senior, I'm like, you're not 60. And that's what I was thinking about as well. I'm like, at some point, I'll be a senior data community advocate here at Shipyard. But that's going to be like in another like 35 years. Angel and I are both going to have gray hair and wrinkles by that point. So, like, what is the difference between like a senior BI analyst and a regular BI analyst, or is there anything that's different?
No, that's a great question. I think there is a huge difference, and I even think those are just kind of the first two tiers that you could be at. So junior, I would say, depending on the company, really, because I have found there's different thresholds. But I would say junior, you really could come in just knowing the basics, and you have shown an interest to really kind of learn the area. Junior, you do not have to have much experience. It's really just you kind of done some work on your own and have a very keen interest to keep learning more. Senior is when you're bumped up. You've been in the role a bit more. You're able to take a greenfield project and kind of do it start to finish. And then from senior, I think you kind of get more, you can go to a lead, you can be principal if you want to go the IC route, but you can also go managerial. So you could start taking on people to kind of mentor and help your way through the data pipeline there. But I think there's a bunch of options, and I think senior is just, in my opinion, it's second level. Like I'm at the second level and I have like 5 more levels I could go up.
Interesting. Yeah, I hear the word principal. I used to be a teacher, and I'm like, wow, like we could be the principal of the data field. I mean, it's pretty good stuff. I'm here. No, that's awesome. No, but with the promotion question, obviously you kind of laid out like a track there, right? Where you can go junior, senior, and the principal, so on and so forth. There, obviously, into managerial positions. Where this conversation has went in most of my other Captain's Compass talks has been not really promotion throughout the job, but promotions as a person. Which you kind of mentioned there, right? Where like the difference between a junior BI analyst and a senior BI analyst, obviously there's years of experience, but like that's always up for debate, right? Like you can kind of get into a role without the years of experience if you have the skills and like the projects and the work. So like you as a person, like how do you like what kind of tools, like what Slack communities, what do you kind of do on a daily basis or weekly basis to like stay up to date on what's going on in the data field? Like how do you keep your skills sharp? Like what kind of things are you looking at on a normal basis to kind of keep up to date in the data field?
That's a great question. Honestly, I probably am one of the few people that lack a lot of things in this area. I actually am not part of any Slack communities, but like everyone on my team is a part of like DBT Slack communities, a bunch of different communities where they kind of write in. But yeah, I would say like honestly, I read a lot of news, and that's kind of how I stay up to date within things that are kind of happening in the broader community. But then when it comes to learning, I would say I learn a lot by doing. I'm very honest with myself. I'm not going to sit down and kind of study and look at stuff. Like I need real life examples to like really keep interest. So that is how I learn.
You heard it here first. You do not need to join any Slack communities to be in the
Yeah.
data field.
Like I get enough Slack pings. I don't need more.
No, yeah, we had a long weekend this weekend. I came back to like 12 Slack notifications, and none of them were from like our shipyard chat. And I was like, "This is not great. This is not what I was looking for when I got back to work this morning." No, that's funny. So, like, whenever you said that you read, like, you keep up to date on like news in the community, are you like looking on LinkedIn? Are you like, are there websites that you like to frequent? Like, where do you go to find those news?
Yeah, no, I'd say LinkedIn's a great source just to kind of see what connections are doing. But outside of that, I definitely TechCrunch is a great resource. I feel like you can look on there every day and find something new.
Yeah, that's one of my. Yeah, we have a newsletter where we put articles in there that we like, and TechCrunch is a
Yeah,
it's a pretty normal occurrence to be in there just because they have pretty good stuff. So,
yeah,
um,
definitely. And I
yeah,
mean, there's also I get the Ben Stancil's. He also sends out a newsletter, so definitely read up on that when that
yeah,
comes out weekly.
yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So we talked about the day to day life of your position. So you've been in a few different positions in the data role. So what would you say is probably your favorite part about being a BI analyst?
Yeah, funny because it definitely revolves around writing SQL, and it's just the fact that you thought that a BIA wouldn't be really touching SQL DBT, but it is my favorite part of the job. If I could stay mainly within writing code and DBT, I would. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely post this interview into some job boards that are looking for analytics engineers,
yeah,
and I'll be like, just contact her. Like she wants to write SQL. She doesn't like to get in Looker. Like this is the person you need. So
yeah. It is by far my favorite.
yeah. So I guess backing up a little bit, since you do like writing SQL so much,
Mhm.
this is a conversation I feel like that comes up a lot in like the BI versus data engineering. Like kind of there's like a fight in between these two teams here. And that's what we've seen at Shipyard too, is that there's a lot of silos between like kind of that like that upstream data team, like the data engineers, like analytics engineers, and then like the analysts that are kind of more on the business facing side of the company. So whenever you were thinking about data preparation, are you doing that data? I think I know the answer to this question already based on our conversation, but are you doing that data preparation more in like the SQL, like DBT side of things, or are you taking it into the BI tool and doing the transformations there?
Yeah, that's so it depends on our data source. If it's something that has, say, like a five trend connector, I would be the one kind of setting that up, getting it to the warehouse, and then taking it from there. If it's something where we need to grab it from an API, I'm going to involve our data platform team to get that data for me. But still, it's going to get to our warehouse, and I'm still going to have to take it at the source level and get it staging ready, and then, kind of throughout the DAG.
Interesting. You mentioned Fivetran. It seems like you're just a full stack data engineer at this point. Like, so yeah. So digging into that a little bit, it's like so you've mentioned Fivetran, you've mentioned Looker, you mentioned DBT. So are there any other tools that you use kind of on a daily basis in your role?
No, I feel like that is the main three.
That's,
So yeah,
it's the holy trinity of BI analysts right there is Fivetran, DBT. I feel like of maybe the data stack in general right now is Fivetran,
yeah,
DBT, and
yeah.
Looker or
I
Tableau.
mean, of course, Snowflake. I'm always in Snowflake too, but
That's fair. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Okay, so your favorite part of the job is writing SQL. So I have to ask the reverse part of this question. So what is maybe your your least favorite part of being a BI analyst?
oh my gosh, easily writing the documentation. I didn't have to do that. That would solved. Everything would be perfect.
That's incredible. I've asked everyone that same question, and I think you're the only person who's actually given me an answer for the least favorite part of the job,
Really?
which makes
Oh
me
my
very,
God.
very happy.
No, no, we're being honest, candidly truthful. It's
No, no, that's great. No, I'm completely with you. So as a BI analyst, like I know that I have to write documentation for our product, but the documentation that I write is obviously drastically different than what you're writing for your organization. So what kind of documentation do you have to write as a BI analyst?
Yeah, so it is, we have to document in DBT. So kind of depending on what stage of the DAG you're at, you're going to depend on kind of the documentation you're writing. But I'd say if you're writing the documentation in DBT that has to do with just column, it's going to be really technical. Then when you get to kind of the visualization portion for your stakeholders, yeah, it's a little more tailored so that they can understand what's
Yeah.
going on. Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like if anyone watches this video that's a vendor that does like ChatGPT documentation generation, you're going to get like 17 connection requests the day after it comes out. Like, hey, we can help you out with the documentation.
Yeah, let me know.
I'm teeing up the vendors for like go get her. No. Oh goodness. So I'm going to transition into kind of like the point of this Captain's Compass series, which is kind of helping people that are maybe new to the space or maybe want to transition roles, switch careers. So for someone who we've hit on this throughout the call, but say like maybe thinking about a junior BI analyst, what skills do they absolutely need before they need to apply for the role? Like what skills do you think are kind of non-negotiables? Like we throw away your application if you don't have them type of skills. Like what would you say they need?
Yeah, I think they definitely need a numbers brain. And I don't know how to necessarily put that into words, but I had a friend in university who loved English and I loved math. And it's just, you can very much see the different way your brain kind of thinks about those problems. And I think if you're going to be coming into the data analytics world community, you definitely need to have a mind that is very good with numbers and kind of always interpreting and questioning how that's coming in. I think that's the biggest thing that you need.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something that's been pretty interesting to me throughout these conversations is that, no one has, like, every time I've asked that question, no one's been like SQL or Python and like just ended the answer there. It always goes back to some sort of soft skill that makes the big difference in these interviews and these conversations that you have with people. And those soft skills are almost things that are really hard to work on, but because like you mentioned, like being good with numbers, you can technically take math classes, right? Like you can go take college algebra. I mean, but that's not really what you're talking about, right? It's more of the way of thinking that you really need in the position, like almost a creativity, right? Where like almost, it's not art, but it almost is, especially working in DBT and doing models. Like you have to be pretty creative to get that stuff done. So, so that's I mean, I think that's good to hear, at least on my side. Like I hope people hear that the right way, is that skills are obviously important. Like knowing how to do things technically is obviously really important, but what really is going to set you apart from different people in the field is like being able to communicate those soft skills really well. Like, can you communicate with stakeholders? Yep. Like, are you curious? Like, will you work hard? Like, those are what people really care about. And it's not really that much about, can you write a super expert SQL script, right? Because Lord knows if you had to do that, I would never have a job in the data field in general, right? Like, I'm like, all right. Anyway, so I think you kind of hit on this already, but say that you had, so you're a senior BI analyst, say that you were interviewing for like a junior BI analyst role for your company. What would be, like, say there was 10 people that applied, they all had similar resumes. What would be the one thing that would differentiate that one person from the other 10? Like, I know you mentioned like the math skills, but is there anything past that someone could kind of do in an interview, like put on the resume? Like, is there something that could you make them kind of get that step up over everyone else?
Yeah, I think especially if you're just starting out and you haven't necessarily had working experience, I think to stand out from the rest of candidates, you'd want to kind of have something you've done on your own, whether that's a training that you found online, that's SQL training, Python training, or you have like a cool side project you did and you're like, hey, I put together this visualization. Just having that initiative and showing that you have actual interest, like this isn't just a job, this is kind of like you have the interest into the field, that'll definitely step up the resume.
No, it's something that my college professors told me when I was in college, was that, hey, like it'd be great if you like did a project to like put it on your resume. And I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna do that. And then learned very quickly that my pride was getting in the way of me getting a job, so I quickly got one together and put one on a GitHub repository. But yeah, it's good to hear that people actually care about that, because if not, you're just doing work for no reason, which is never great. So but anyways, yeah, so thank you so much for hopping on here and discussing kind of your role in the BI analyst world. I know I've learned a lot from it. Like I said, I didn't know that BI analysts even had to write SQL, so I know I've learned a lot today, so hopefully everyone else has too.